Right, good evening, everyone in the library as well as from Zoom. Sorry, today it's a one-man show, so I have to operate the computer because Kainen's not here, and then I have to be the MC. So I got to keep running back and forth. Yeah. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and it's great to have some precious time for ourselves coming here, sitting together and practice together. So for the associations, there's still same news that the renovation is going on in June, hopefully. So this coming weekend, some of us will be there to help move things to the kuti so that we can renovate the retreat center, and hopefully we can welcome more members, you know, with a newer facility. So probably in October, hopefully. So now, today, our speaker, it's our dear David Orose. Normally, I will be given a bio of the speaker of the day, which I will, you know, read out and introduce who the speaker is. But for David, it's just, David is an experienced leader of meditation group, both here in Sydney and also in Hong Kong. And his approach is simple, practical, natural, and it's a discipline of ease in practice. I think I got to dig a little bit deeper about David to talk about. And that's it, you know, like, it's just so simple. And that's what David is, who's David is. We went hiking together sometimes, and I remember that he was talking to another hiking friend. I don't think it's Buddhist or something, about like how to use mindfulness to reduce weight. and he was so intrigued and so excited, and that friend was going around sharing with people what David has taught him. I talked to my husband was saying, what is he talking about? So today we are grateful that we can hear from the teacher directly about the teaching of Dharma, how to use it in the daily life. But today, David in particular will show us how we can attract happiness and apply in our daily life. Right. So thank you very much, David, for spending your time here and share your Dharma knowledge with all of us, and, you know, as well as the audience in Zoom. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I will go back to the computer now soon. So before we begin, as usual, let us pay respect to the Triple Gem as well as our teacher.
So thank you so much, Meredith, for that lovely introduction. Simple, just like me. And welcome everyone. And on this cold evening, it's a miracle that anybody shows up. So we're here, which is wonderful. And unfortunately, I can't see the people on Zoom, but I'm assuming that they can see me. That's right, isn't it, Meredith? Yeah.
Yes, I can see you perfectly well.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. And so we're going to have some fun tonight, and hopefully explore a little deeper the idea and the experience of happiness and the simplicity of happiness. And I like the way Meredith introduces me. It sort of makes me sound like the mystery man, you know. So maybe I should start by just clearing up some of that mystery. It's my journey to, I guess, since the focus is on happiness, what is the real meaning of happiness, and how does one get there? And I think if I'm any sort of an expert in that, it's through my own journey. So I'll share a little bit of that. My early life was sort of developing the ego, developing the typical, you know, go to school and you're clever and you top the class and you become captain of the school, and then you go off and do medicine. And just because you're doing well at school, you get shoved into these ego building activities. And I took that pretty much as far as I could. And, you know, I graduated as an honors graduate in medicine, and I know I could have done whatever I wanted to in that field. But something told me that that there was something in me that just wasn't happy in the just a knowing that I just wasn't happy. I was achieving, but it's like I'm climbing a ladder, but the ladder's on the wrong wall. And that was just a deep intuitive knowing that something's off here. You know, everybody else has seemed to be playing this game, but it's not my game. Yeah, so I had this feeling that I don't really belong in this group. You know, I mean, I'd hang out with all my doctor colleagues and they'd all have the sort of conversations they do, but there was no real meeting. I didn't feel like we were really connecting, and it was disconcerting. And so part of this unrest was sort of expressing itself in it's sort of like daydreaming, I guess you'd call it. I was not fully present. And of course, as a young doctor, you've got to be absolutely fully present. So that concerned me. But one thing that's interesting, because I was doing a pretty important task one particular morning, where I was counseling this couple who were having some difficulties, real difficulties with their baby who'd been circumcised and was really bleeding profusely from this circumcision, which is supposed to be just a very very tiny sort of operation. So it was posing a grave risk, and possibly the baby could die. And the surgeon who did the operation passed the onus of counseling the parents to me. And I felt like I wasn't ready for this. It was just beyond my pay grade. You know, it was just like, wow, how can I find the resources to be able to counsel this couple? I'm a young, at that stage, I think I was about 21 year old doctor, and I don't know what to do. And out of that feeling of just, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? I walked into the room, and on the coffee table was this book, any old book, and I picked it up, and it was by a fellow called Dr. Ainsley Mears, who lived in Melbourne. And it sort of basically said, I can fix all your problems in 20 minutes. And I thought, he's pretty confident, and I flicked through a few pages, and everything that was here, was absolutely spot on. He was a meditation teacher he was a psychiatrist who'd been to the East and sat at the foot of all the sages and really downloaded the whole shebang. And it was just simply written, spoke to my heart, and it just made me feel like I'm supported. The fact that showed up at that time, I felt suddenly calm and confident, and the interview went beautifully. I mean, it was very, very moving and very important that I stay centered. And had I not picked up that book and felt the message somehow immediately, I think I'm sure it wouldn't have gone well at all. So I decided basically after that interview, the most important thing that I could do is to get down and meet this fellow and spend some time with him. So it's difficult when you're a busy young doctor to find that time, but the next available holiday, I went down to Melbourne and spent 2 weeks with this doctor. And he basically just transmitted the whole teaching in 2 weeks to me. He knew that I was really hungry for it, and he didn't hold back. Everything he did, every gesture he made, everything he said, was just so coherent. And I came back from there just absolutely radically changed in my being. My work now became a lot more interesting, and I felt that I had the resources to really enjoy what I was doing. But there was something in me that knew that I would not be following the typical trajectory of climbing that ladder. And as it happened, Dr. Mears was force by way of his interest in these things, which were really alternative, you know, to resign from his medical practice and basically voluntarily lose his medical registration, which I thought was amazing. But it had great appeal to me, and I sort of stored that in the back of my mind. You know, well, it's not such a bad way to be. You're free. You know, I don't have to talk to all those strange guys and girls who show up in the tea room and talk about stuff I'm not interested in. I can talk to the people that I really want to be with. And so this idea was planted as a seed in me. And it grew subterraneously while I was doing all the usual doctory stuff. And then I won't tell you the boring details of what happened, but basically I came to the end of my career. Something inside me was preparing me for it. I had a dream which told me it was going to happen. And I had a dream basically that I was in a Volkswagen, a people's car, that's German for people's car. And a wind came and catapulted me out of the people's car into a green meadow. And it was a big, high journey out of that car. And I landed in this green meadow. And I looked around and it was like this whole new world of possibility had opened up to me. And that was a dream that happened around the same time that I found myself, you know, at loggerheads with my colleagues, and it led to the end of my medical career, right when I was on the top of that ladder. But I knew that this was my path, that this was my true nature, and that I was on home ground and it was going to be all right. And every step I took from then on has just led me to more and more happiness, which is remarkable. So I speak from experience, but it's not the sort of experience that I can say, I climbed that ladder and I climbed that ladder and I got a PhD in that. No, that doesn't interest me at all. I can't even find that guy, you know. And that happens to be my path. I'm not saying it's your path, or, you know, whoever's listening, I wouldn't want you to put off your studies and how important it is. But it's also important to ask yourself the question, am I really happy? And then to go a little further and to explore what is happiness. And that became my sort of mantra. You know, I'd wake up every morning and ask myself that question, not in any sort of other way than just to explore if I'm not doing something that I actually enjoy doing, I'm brave enough to make a change. And so everything I do is I do it because I want to do it. And it doesn't mean to say that I don't do the usual chores, because obviously that's important to get to the freedom that you want to attain. But basically happiness is my nature, and happiness is who I am and what I do. And when I'm around, other people tend to share their happiness with me. It's infectious. That's one of the great things. The ego is, it doesn't survive happiness and laughter and humor. So we take ourselves way too seriously. I mean, I did as a young fellow, you know, bury my head in the books and wasted all the days sort of studying and taking myself seriously. But, you know, the older I get and the happier I get, the more playful and the more childlike I get. And so the ego, I've discovered, tends to get dissolved in laughter and play. So I became very playful. And I love playing with my kids, and I like playing with people. Everybody I meet, I see as my playmate. And I wonder if I should tell this story. My wife said, don't tell that story. But I came down today from the mountains in the silent carriage. And you all know the sign that's up in the silent carriage. It says, quiet, this is a quiet carriage. And then there's the lady who says, shh, you know. So while I was there was this person who was a non-English speaking person who had the job of putting that sign up in the carriage, just sort of tidying it up before I got in the carriage. And he asked me, how do you assemble these words? How do you put it together? And I was in a playful mood, and so I arranged the words to say, "This is quite a carriage." And it amused me greatly to see that sign up there. So I took a picture, which, if those of you who just, I'll show you later on. The rest of the signs in the carriage, by the way, were the normal ones, but this one particular one was quite a carriage. And I thought, I'm in this carriage, so that's fair enough. This is quite a carriage. So there's one carriage that you may find on the train that says that, and that's a playful sign that you can have a laugh at. And it's absolutely rebellious, and you shouldn't do it. I know all that, but it's a lot of fun, and I don't think it did a lot of harm. So that's the sort of opportunity that I don't miss for any opportunity for, breaking a rule in a way which allows joy to emerge, because basically happiness is peace, is when happiness is at rest, and it's joy when it's expressed in its dynamic form. So playfulness. So that extended to playing with my name. At the time then, when I landed in my green meadow and thought, here I am, who am I? I thought it's time to change my name. I was born with the name David Anthony Rose. And then I thought, well, I'm not stuck with that name. I'm free to change it. What would I change it to if I was going to change it? And I sat with that for a year or two. What could I change it to? And I came across a book one day that was called The Perfume of Silence. And that name just really stuck with me, The Perfume of Silence. I thought, wow, what a poetic, beautiful phrase. And it delivers something wonderful. It's just that intangible presence of something which you know deeply, and you don't even have to see it, but you can taste it, you can smell it. And then I was sitting down having a cup of coffee at a coffee shop once, and I was just signing my old name, and it was feeling a little awkward. And then I found myself putting an O in the middle of my name, just a lovely big O, David O. Rose. And I thought, wow, where did that come from? And then I thought, well, what could you make sense of that? And Perfume of Silence, David of the Rose, O apostrophe, David O. Rose was born. So I gave birth to myself. And that is absolutely not out of any sort of hubris or anything. It just wanted to happen that way. So every time I see my name in print, every time somebody says my name, it's a reminder of that perfume of the rose, which is the rose of the mystery of our Buddha nature, if you like. It's the equivalent of the lotus. The English rose is the equivalent of the Eastern lotus. So it's the David of the essential nature. You see, this is basically what I came to realize. That's who I am. And even my birthday is on the 29th of February, which is a leap year, which is sort of not a real birthday. I sort of slid in the gap. And so it fitted with me. All the sages were teaching me the same sort of stuff about basically whoever this guy thinks he is, that's not it. There's no tangible, person, but there is an experience of David of the Rose, which I was sort of heard expressed in various ways, but one of them was wisdom is to know that I am nothing, and love is to know that I am everything. And my life flows between these two poles. Wisdom is to know that my life is nothing and that I am nothing, no thing, not a thing. And love is to know that I am everything, everything. And between those two poles of no thing and everything, my life flows. I don't have to do it. It happens. And that's the key of the meaning of happiness. It comes from the word happiness. So it's not this sort of Hollywood version of happy, and it's a peaceful knowing your true nature and an expression of that true nature in everything you do. And the joy that is manifested in that dynamism is the joy that springs from a totally separate self or limited self or ego-bound self. It's the freedom of your true nature expressing itself in life. And when I came to be attracted to Buddhism, the image of the Buddha sitting on the lotus and his great big beaming smile, and I thought, that's my sort of guy, you know, I whatever he's got sitting out there on that lotus, that's a reflection of who I would love to be, who I sense that I am, and so different to the Christian background where I came from, where the images in the church was of the Christ being crucified. That just from an early age, they just thought, oh, there's something that doesn't feel quite right about that image. You know, it's doesn't impart what I know about who I am. And so there was this attraction to what ultimately became for me the understanding of Buddha nature, which is the same thing as what I'm talking about as happiness or freedom or our essential being, which is flowing between those two poles of wisdom and love, understanding, and we could call it beauty and truth and understanding and love. Whatever we call it, it's a collapse of me, the subject, and something out there, the object that I'm sort of trying to attain. So the traditional idea of happiness is, if I get the Porsche, or I get the girl, or I get the job, or I get the PhD, then I'm going to be happy. So it's pushed out into the future, and it's never actually here now. It's nowhere. And if you turn that word around, it's one of my favorite little playing with words, which is now here. If you bring nowhere now here, then wherever you are, that's where happiness is. That's where it's happening. There's nowhere else. This is as good as it gets, you know, just like they say in the movies. This is it. There's nowhere to go. And everything that happens, if we have that attitude of welcoming, because how can we not welcome it, whatever it might be, whether it's something that is pleasant or unpleasant, it's all exactly the way it's meant to unfold. It's no different whether there's 5 or 6 people who show up or 600 people who show up today. It doesn't matter. What is expressed here is what needs to be expressed here. And it doesn't matter how much preparation I do, it's what happens here that's meant to happen here. And to trust that radically, you see, then you can make your notes and throw them away. You can start to be more present. And that's the definition of the other key word in what I want to talk about this evening, which is engagement. We call ourselves the Association of Engaged Buddhists. So I'd like to sort of drill down a little bit about how does that idea of engagement relate to what I've been discussing about happiness. We have, I think, in Meredith, the epitome of the engaged Buddhist. I mean, she shows up every time, does exactly what she needs to do selflessly, gets the whole job, all the things rolling in so many different ways. And she's incredible. How does she do it? Well, I'd like to ask her, but my guess is that she is showing up because that's what she enjoys doing, that she's engaged because that's her nature. And when she's like that, she evokes that same response in me. I can never say no to Meredith. She says to me, David, you're doing a talk, and say, yes, Meredith, you know. It's just, that's the nature of engagement. So in my younger days, when I was a young doctor, I used to go to prisons and hospitals, and you know, I saw so many people who were locked in, and my idea of engagement was to go to visit these people wherever they were and do whatever I needed to do to help them. But then my idea of engagement expanded beyond that, to know that every moment, if I'm fully engaged in being here, in really being here, then whatever shows up and whatever I need to do is actually something that arises now. And if Meredith was to say to me, you know, David, I want you to go and talk to the school about youth suicide and its prevention, off I would go. I wouldn't have to think twice about it, and it would be a wonderful thing to do. And in fact, that's something I want to talk a little bit about, the tragedies of something like that, and how can we reach people like that? How can we begin to help them discover what happiness is and turn their life around? And there is a pathway. Like the Buddhist pathway is from suffering to joy and happiness, and how we do that. And the sooner we start that, the better, especially for these kids. And it's a real issue now. You know, they're not happy, and they can't see a future, and they feel that we've let them down, and so we have a duty to reach out to them and to connect with them in whatever way we can. And it's a wonderful thing, and there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to do that, to have the sort of compassion that reaches these people. And I'm really impressed with the youth of today. You know, I really feel that we're sort of handing over, or I'm handing over at my stage of life, to a wonderful, resourceful, you know, like the Greta Thunbergs of the world. She's an extreme example, but she knows where happiness lies. She trusts her true nature that takes her to hold that protest placard and say, hey guys, you know, you're going in the wrong direction. And she stepped off her ladder at school every Friday to show that sign and to get people turned on about climate change. So she's passionate, and she's expressing her joy in doing what she feels is the most important thing and challenging the system. And that's what we've got to help the youth of today see, that they have so much resource and they see the world with such fresh eyes. And how can we foster that spark of happiness in them, which is not going to happen by just the typical, you know, stepwise direction that we think that they should be following because our fathers and our grandfathers followed. They've got to find a new path, and we've got to have the courage to foster that. I love the way that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this. He talks about gladdening the mind, so that this sort of despair that a lot of the young people have, there are pathways for gladdening the mind. He talks about the seeds that lie in the store consciousness, which is the what Carl Jung called the collective consciousness, and deep down in our being. And if we water the seeds of joy and happiness, then what comes up is the lotus, comes up out of the mud. And similarly, if we water the seeds of violence and despair and envy and so on, then what we get is the prickly cactus. You know, so we have a duty to recognize the seeds and to water them and to bring them to fruition by the way we relate to each other. So he talked about what's called the love treaty in relationship with our friends, where we agree to water the seeds of joy and happiness that lie in everyone. And that we ask the same, that you water the seeds of joy and happiness in me. And this becomes a conscious practice. In a Sangha, this is a wonderful thing to do, to notice the beauty in people, and to let them know that you see it and that it's something which is valued and noticed. And that can be as simple as the smile, a greeting, the way we look at each other, the way we're present to each other. So we're watering those seeds. And, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the, once we've watered them and the flower is coming up to the surface, we have to find ways of keeping it above the surface. We don't let it slip back down, so that when it's manifest, that we really relate in a way that invites it to stay a little longer. So we hang out with our friends and we just want to be there for a bit longer. And we find ways of really nourishing and extending that joyful experience. And we can, similarly, we can turn away from this opposite. You know, if we're in the presence of people who are really telling us about terrible stuff, and every time you turn on the news, you're going to get all the, you know, the latest COVID figures and all the impending wars and so on and so forth. And it's just too much sometimes, you know, so that we have to be able to turn the TV off. In the old days, change the CD, and we can press stop and we can play a different tune. We can walk, instead of on the dark side of the street, we can choose to walk on the sunny side of the street. And this is a really important practice, because the weight of too much exposure to negativity can really destroy the seeds of happiness and peace, which are really inherent in all of us. And so this is the sort of way that we can gladden the mind, if you like. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about there are 10 paramis in Buddhism, and the 4 of them that he highlights is, the first one he talks about is Maitri, M-A-I-T-R-I, which is friendship, engagement. And this is, it sounds like a sort of a defined concept, but it opens into boundlessness. Once we know how to be a friend and how to invite friendship, it's something which has no limit. It's one of the boundless paramis. And the next one he talks about is Mudita. Mudita is sympathetic joy. It's taking real joy in the other person's joy. You know, so often when somebody's really had some sort of windfall and really doing well in life, we can feel, instead of really celebrating, we can feel envious and jealous, and we can bring them down. So we need to understand mudita. And again, that's something expansive and limitless once we know how to experience that. And the third one that he talks about is karuna, which is compassion. And the compassion to do whatever it takes to help in the suffering of our partner and people that we relate to in our life, in our sangha, that out of karuna, out of deep compassion, we can find a way to really evoke the gladdening of their mind and to make that a diligent practice. Again, this is one of the boundless virtues. And the fourth one that he underlines in this gladdening of the mind is Uppekha, which is non-discrimination, inclusiveness. That it's not, I'm all right, Jack, and that's your problem. It's, we're in this together. And if I'm not understanding you, I need to be brave enough to say, do you feel that I'm really understanding you? And sometimes the answer is, well, no, you're off the mark. And that can lead to a real deepening of understanding, that humble recognition that we're not really as engaged, as inclusive as we need to be. And that sort of non-discrimination, us and them, needs to be broken down. And when we practice that, again, that's one of the limitless virtues. So those 4 virtues, Maitri, Mudita, Karuna, Uppekha, they are something to explore deeply, and they're the seeds, if you like, which need to be watered every day for the gladdening of the mind, the cultivation of happiness. So we do have a choice. We can, again, you know, I love to play with words, which should be obvious by now, but if you think of suffering, and think of it as a ring, we can take that ring off. And when you take the suffer ring off, you can sort of look through it and you can see infinite possibilities through that little ring. Because when we're suffering, it's a call to understand deeply what's caused it and to find a way out of it. This is the essence of the Buddhist path, to look through the lens of that suffering and see something boundless, which is calling us. So it can be as simple as just turning off the television, which is depressing us, and going outside and taking a walk around the lake or taking a walk into nature and seeing something which takes us out of that repetitive cycle of negativity. So these are just some reflections about the nature of suffering, the nature of happiness, how to cultivate it, and how to be playful. So just before we do our meditation now, we're going to have some in vivo playfulness. And it's one thing to talk about happiness, it's another thing to be happy. So I sort of learned most of what I know about happiness from my kids, and they taught me this lovely little song, which I'm going to sing for you, and then you're going to sing with me. And you all know it, so there's no excuse, and all our Zoom friends know it, so you can sing along at home. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then you really gotta show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Ridiculous, but it absolutely changes your mood, right? You feel playful and bring it on, and and you sing a few rounds of that, it's pretty hard to take anything too seriously. And if you have, and if there's a pet in the room, the dog will join in, and you break the cycle. So that is as good as any mantra you've ever learned, or any sort of chanting you've ever learned. Just a very simple, playful thing. I'd advise you, whenever you find yourself taking yourself too seriously, go and have a good lie down, have a rest, get up, sing that song, and then go for a walk in nature, and you'll have a very different day. So on a more serious note, if we really want to reach out to people and to really do something about some of the despair that we find in our midst, the most important thing to work on is to ask ourselves, am I happy? That's the first thing, is to recognize, to take yourself seriously in that sense of your happiness is the most important thing, because it's not a personal thing, it's an impersonal thing. It's something which, once you recognize the boundless nature of it, and then you have a sort of duty to share that, and it becomes easy, and in fact it's just an overflow into life. And you'll find that you will have a capacity to touch people in a way which you may not have recognized in yourself, and be brave enough, dare to be happy, and dare to offer your happiness to other people, I would suggest, because that really is our true nature. Whatever happens, happens. All right, well, now I'd like to, we've done some playfulness, we've done some talking about concepts, and now we're going to meditate. And just before we start to meditate, I want to describe my approach to meditation, which is, again, utterly simple. It doesn't involve any particular posture. It doesn't involve any striving. It's just wherever you are, that's where your meditation is happening. In fact, meditation is close to the essence of our true nature, just being and attending awareness itself. So you're all sitting reasonably symmetrically, which is a good thing. So if you just now prepare for around about 20 minutes of meditation, and those at home in Zoom land, if you'd like to do the same, and this is an opportunity to really touch deeply the seeds of joy and happiness that lie within us. So I'll be sounding the bell. So we begin by noticing the points of contact where we feel gravity pulling us to the sense of pressure on the chair or the feet on the floor, hands on the chair, or wherever we are if we're lying down. Wherever we feel that sensation, we ask ourselves, just as we could ask ourselves about the bell, where does it come from? Where is it experienced? And where does it go to? And if we look deeply, we'll see that the sounds, sensations, the thoughts that are arising, feelings, are all arising here and now. And whatever it is that's hearing the sounds, sensing the senses, perceiving the perceptions, we could call emptiness, Buddha nature, reality. It doesn't really matter what word we use, but we know what we're pointing to. Whatever it is that is hearing these words right now, is what I would call our true nature. Everything arises and falls away into our true nature. We don't need to grasp anything at all. The breathing is happening by itself. We don't need to give it any help at all. Breathing is happening. In the ease of our being and the utter simplicity of just being here now is experienced, and nothing else matters right now. And much of the time, we can actually abide in this place of effortless being. only having to attend to planning and thinking and doing, when that's clearly what needs to be done. But much of the time, we can unhook from all of that and just rest in the utter simplicity of our true nature. Take the ladder off the wall. Come back here, now. And when we allow this openness to be experienced deeply, we're also open to the upsurge of whatever it is that we've been pushing down, that needs to rise up and be recognized, but not wrestled with. We can just allow whatever comes up to be there, whether it's difficult thoughts or difficult feelings, difficult bodily sensations. In meditation, there's a welcoming, a making peace with ourselves and others in the depths of our own being. The challenges can be just like clouds passing by. We don't have to get busy pushing them away. They just float away by themselves. and in the peace, the happiness of our true nature. We are free. And we can free others. And when we're engaged with our true nature, our Buddha nature, we are engaging. Life comes to us. People come to us. Engagement happens. And it's utterly effortless. Effortlessness is happiness, openness, all these wonderfulnesses happen by themselves. Fearlessness. Desirelessness. Just welcoming whatever comes along, knowing that we're free to take care of our body and our boundaries when necessary, but we will know that intuitively. We don't have to struggle with rules. We just know the deep knowing. And this knowing grows with every time we sit and be with ourselves like this in our meditation. So our meditation becomes who we are, not so much what we do, but who we are. so that we're free to just enjoy the flow of life as it is, welcoming, listening, happening. So just taking a moment to notice the shift and the opening of our sensibilities, our senses. As we touch that place, we see more clearly, we feel more naturally. So there's some sort of a filter which has been removed. We experience things immediately and naturally. So now I'd just like to have a little time just to open to any comments or questions that might arise from our gathering here and also our gathering on Zoom. If we touch this deep place of happiness, then the question just sort of arises by itself. It's not something that we have to intellectualize, but we just find something that we are moved to share, and this is a contribution to the happiness that we are as a collective. In other words, that the question that somebody might pose is often the very question that we would have asked if we thought of it. It's a sort of mystery how, when we come together with the intention of exploring something like this, then there's no personal sense of I need to find the answer, but the answer arrives by itself.
David, I think I like the, you always say that it's effortless, at ease. I think a lot of people are putting too much effort into practice, into doing something, and that makes things harder for them. Like you're achieving happiness supposed to be at ease. It kind of come easily, not doing too much, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You summed it up very beautifully. And we don't have to go looking for happiness. That's who we are. And to recognize it, to be it. Exactly. Yeah.
I think most people are kind of like either brought up in a culture or like been taught that things don't come easily. So even happiness, you got to do something before you can get the happiness. So it's probably in the process that people are trying to grasp that happiness, and then it turned out to be unhappy.
Yeah, you've got to deserve it. It's part of the perfectionism. We've got to, we've got to pass all the tests. And I mean, not that there's anything wrong with achievement or jumping the hoops, but that's not to be confused with the happiness that's already here. And we do that happily. So one of the key things, when people come to me and they're often in trouble with all sorts of things, relationships and addictions and so on. I ask them, are you really doing what you enjoy doing? Is this the person you really want to be with? And to be brave enough to look deeply and ask those questions and start to take them seriously. to know that we are free to do what we enjoy doing and to be with whom we enjoy being. We don't have to put up with stuff. We can change difficulties or conflicts or what we're struggling with by being more and more of who we are. That brings about change by itself. And accepting that change is inevitable part of this life, and that what's unchanging is the joy and the freedom of our true nature. That's unchanging. But all the things that arise are shifting and changing. But ultimately, if we really look deeply, all the sages say the same thing. There is no change in the amount of good and bad in the world. It's just the way it is. We have the idea we're going to change the world, we're going to make it better, we're going to make ourselves better, you know. Good luck with that. Once we have equanimity, then we can embrace life as it is. And it's perfect. It's perfectly imperfect. Takes a great load off us. Doesn't mean that we don't get engaged in helping, you know, we can be more helpful with that sort of attitude because it's happening effortlessly. We're not striving to fix things, but fixing happens by itself.
So at one point you said the ego dissolves because of happiness. Can you explain a little bit more around that? Because my ego is so strong.
Everyone is.
Well, recognizing that your ego is so strong is humility. Yes, the ego, there's nothing wrong with the ego in the sense that, you know, it's part of life. It's something that arises, but not to identify with it. It's like a conditioning. And, you know, we have certain egoistic sort of tendencies which play themselves out in that particular way, and we can see them as they arise. But if you think of it as the analogy would be like driving a car and the passenger wants to take over the wheel and is driving into the wall, that's not going to happen. So we're driving from the place of our true nature, and the passenger might be the ego that wants to take over. Now, that's where the conditioned mind or the conditioned body or whatever is in the wrong seat. It's best not even the passenger seat, put that one in the back seat, you know. So it's a relativization of the ego. So we don't identify with it, we don't feed it. We're not watering the seeds of striving to be bigger and better. And, you know, Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. So we don't have to be all shiny and beautiful. You know, we can just be the way we are. And that's beautiful enough. And when we recognize that, we relax deeply into ourselves, and we emanate beauty and possibility and openness. And it's boundless. It does a much better job than the ego could ever do. So all you have to do is recognize the ego when it arises. You know, that's ego. And the moment it's recognized, it's relativized. It begins to dissolve. But if you want to dissolve it quickly, sing a stupid song.
Thank you.
Have any other happy songs to sing?
Well, there's a variation of the one that we did before, which works just as well. If you want, we can sing that one. It's so sing it with me. It's if you're happy and you know it, touch your nose. Come on, you'll take it too soon. If you're happy and you know it, touch your nose. If you're happy and you know it, then you've really got to show it. If you're happy and you know it, touch your nose. So, yeah, you know, just allow the playfulness just to just to take you, if you just watch kids and dogs and play, I mean, it's just wonderful. I go for a walk commonly, and lucky enough to see dogs playing around in the field and kids running around, and it's just so freeing and so lovely, and it evokes something natural in us. And they're not trying to achieve anything; they're just having fun. I think we need to have more fun. What do you think up the back there, Alex?
Gabriel asking if there is someone we know who feels little true joy or peace for their strong personalities, in particular one who is enveloped in both love and hate for their self, how do we share our happiness and joy with them when the idea of egolessness is simply too threatening to them? Even if bringing this up carefully, they tend to seem attacked, even when they know well what the benefits of less self has had for me, and that I simply want to share this.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and well thought out. And it's an important question because you're right that if you challenge somebody's ego, then they become defensive and they push you away, and so that's not the way to go. The way to go is just to be knowingly who you are, and to rest as that. So it's a very simple thing. So for example, someone who's in distress and they've got a lot of self-hatred, and instead of just pointing it out or what they should be doing, we just comfortably and relaxedly just be ourselves and communicate our loving acceptance to the other person. And it doesn't have to be in words, it can be non-verbal. It can be the way we look at them, the way we pay attention, the way that we listen. And listening is underestimated. We don't have to fix people up. In fact, I'm still learning this, with my son who's now 50. He taught me this lesson last week. Dad, what are you telling me what to do? You think I don't know what to do? It's just that I'm not doing it, Stop telling me what to do. I thought, I've done it again, I'm trying to fix him instead of just listening to him and just loving him as he is, I'm still learning that lesson. But if we just are willing to learn that lesson and just to come back, it's okay just to be at ease in myself and allow this person to be exactly as they are. And if I just explore, so if they say, I hate myself, and, I did this wrong and I did that wrong, and just listen to that, and I might say, instead of wanting to fix that, I must say that, oh, that sounds so painful, so difficult. Is it really true? And so they can then just explore deeper, so that the exploration is occurring from their own being, rather than us imposing some belief on them. That you're just inviting more spaciousness by your own spaciousness. So the openness that you are is a space which is inductive. It's like two tuning forks. If you're resonating at a certain frequency, the other person will begin to resonate at that frequency at the same time. And the one with the more connection to authenticity, to openness, to true nature, is the one will have the stronger resonance and invite the other person to meet there. So they're sitting in their true seat rather than being taken over by some small sub-personality that's involved in hate or destructive behavior and so on. That's something that can happen just by that engagement without having to give them a lecture or something. So while we're waiting for another question, I can tell you a little story that I was going to tell you. I just remembered it again. To be able to discern whether or not something is good or bad, and how can we really be sure, is many of you will have heard this story. It's one of my favorite stories about the Chinese farmer who had one son, and one horse. And the horse was absolutely invaluable on the farm. It dragged heavy loads and, you know, dragged the logs over for making the house. And this was a very precious horse. So one day the horse ran away, and the villagers next door came and oh no, you've lost your horse. How awful, how sad. And the farmer was a wise farmer. You know, he said, well, let's wait and see. And the next day, the horse comes back with 7 more horses. It had met up with its mates and back, you know, now there's 8 horses in the field. And the farmer's happy. The villagers come out, oh, you're so lucky. You're so fortunate. You know, you've got 8 horses, you know, isn't that fantastic? And so now they were pretty wild horses. So the young boy now, he's just reaching sort of puberty. And so he hops on one of the horses and he falls off the horse. And the villagers come over, you know, oh no, don't tell me you've broken your leg and you can't work in the field and help your dad. How awful, what a terrible thing to happen. And the farmer says, well, let's wait and see. And the next day, the authorities knock on his door. War has been declared. We want every young man who is capable to come and fight this war. And it's a war to the death. You'll have to say goodbye to your son forever. And I'm going to search this house for able-bodied men. And there's the boy lying there with a broken leg, totally incapable of moving, off the list. And the farmer is smiling. Was it good luck? Was it bad luck? And this story has no ending. You see, you don't know if it's good or if it's bad. It just is. That's a lovely story to remember when you're having a tough time.
Any more questions come through? David, just in relation to your discussing your issues with your son, I too have a 22-year-old son, and I find with me, it's probably not just your experience or the fact that you want to mold or shape them. You want to, because I found with myself, I think it's because you care and you wish to try to avoid some of the pitfalls of youth. And it's that zeal for caring, I find that I have to try and rein in at times, which I have a great deal of difficulty with. Have you got any tips?
Wow, that's a pretty universal fatherly problem. I mean, it's lovely to hear such love, but it's great trust in life, isn't it, that we have to impart as well. If we say, you know, you don't put your finger in the plug, it's a good idea. You know, you don't want your kid to be electrocuted, but we don't want to extend that to, you know, don't do this, don't do that. So we're starting to paint a picture of life as being potentially dangerous, which is an expression of our own fear. But when we live fearlessly, it doesn't mean that we're living with bravado, but we know that difficulties happen in life and they can be character building. And in fact, a boy doesn't really grow without coming to deal with some challenges, and to be able to know that this can cause real difficulties, and yet to trust that the son will find some solution, you know, without us having to do it. You know, when they're very young, obviously you have to step in, but you also have to gradually disengage. And I'm still learning it, you know, so I know how hard that is to do, and I empathize with the struggle, but I think there's a real strength in just allowing that space for exploration to happen. Thank you.
I think I just had conversation with my 18-year-old as well with my husband. Because it's like, see, they have their own thinking, and then she started to kind of like hang out with friends very late and things like that. So of course, like being a parent, like, especially my husband was saying, you know, why do you have to go here? Why do you have to go there? Why don't you come back and tell things? But she cannot accept that reason. So, you know, when I look at this heated discussion, I was thinking, okay, bring myself to present. And then I start asking questions to her and say that, why do you think we do what we are doing? If we do not care, if we do not care for where you are, where do you go, and we are not the loving parents. I mean, being a parent, you have to care of what you are doing, because we are worried that, you know, you might be in dangers and type of things. It's like, instead of I confronting her, like, you know, you should listen to me, and because I'm your mom, and I try to make her think like why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I can see that she's kind of like coming down and try to think from that point of view. Of course, there's a lot of things that we still need to discuss with them, but I think it's respect them in the sense that, because I was sharing with her the story of, I say, often sometimes parents, they don't know how to deal with them. They have no clue. It's like, I'm losing control. Again, it's control. I'm losing control of you. And sometimes you just use your authority and, okay, I ban you from going out, or like, you know, or you don't chase you out from the home or something like that. I mean, this happened to myself. So I think my dad doesn't know how to deal with me growing up, you know, like, and we just, you know, our relationship just turned sour because he doesn't know how to deal with me. I told her that I don't want this to happen. It's like, I want to understand you, and I want you to understand me as well. Yeah.
Just a very, very brief response to what you've shared. This is the lovely sharing. That is that the greatest gift we can give our children is our own happiness and freedom. And we have to set boundaries, but they have to break them. And it's a sort of it's an ongoing conversation. And so we have to do our job, they have to do their job. If they can never break the rules, they're in jail. You see, they have to be able to do that. You have to respect that. So it's your own trust in yourself and your happiness, and that's a wonderful gift to give your children.
But it's just that you have to, as you say, set the boundary of, like, you know, the difference between letting her do whatever she wants to do.
Yeah, well, we have to tell them, you know, this is how society works. This is how it works for me, and this is what I do, and you know, these are the reasons. And a child will experiment, and they'll learn, and you have to expect them to do things and to get into difficulties, and that's the way life works. And most kids, if you've got sensible parents like you, will have internalized that. But still, that capacity to experiment is part of aliveness, and so you need to give them the freedom for that. Not to be too worried if, you know, I mean, and sometimes difficulties happen. We have to allow some space for challenges to happen. But how many mistakes have we made? You know, and we just do our best. But the essential thing is that we trust life, we trust ourselves, and we love them, and that's the bottom line. And they pick that up. If they've got that, they're going to be as good as anyone else can be.
So we just have got to expect challenges.
Yeah, expect challenges. It's a good sign. I challenged every rule in the book. Freedom doesn't come unless you are willing to do that. Okay, well, I think we're done, unless there are any more questions. Yeah. Okay. So thank you all for coming out on this cold night, and it's been my joy to be here and to share my thoughts about happiness and experience of happiness with you all, and look forward to meeting you again one day.
Thank you, David. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.